New Blood, a short Dvar Torah for Parashat Kedoshim. Once again, I know where I begin this Dvar Torah, but know not where it will end. Last week we discussed blood in various parts of the parasha. We divided the parasha into three parts: the Yom Kippur service, where blood plays an important but secondary role, the laws of animal slaughter, where blood takes a central role, and the parasha concluding with the laws of the forbidden relationships, where blood doesn't play a role at all. The word is not even mentioned once, and therefore, we too chose to ignore it. This is where our problems begin. As we said, the laws of forbidden relationships that conclude Parashat Achremot do not deal with blood, but they're not the only laws of forbidden relationships in Sefer Vayikra. This week's parasha, Parashat Kedoshim, ends with verses similar to Parashat Achremot, albeit on a smaller scale. So far, everything I said is well known. What is slightly less well known is that Parashat Achremot deals more with prohibitions, whereas Parashat Kedoshim focuses more on punishment. What is much less well known is that the punishment the Torah imposes for forbidden relationships, the death penalty, is formulated in a somewhat unusual way, Dmei Hembam. How unusual? The phrase "their blood is upon them," Dmei Hembam, is mentioned only 5 times in Tanakh, all 5 in our parasha in Perek Kaf. Once in the concluding verse, a man or a woman who has upon him or an ov or yidoni shall surely be put to death, their blood is upon them. And 4 more times in the laws of the forbidden relationships. Another similar phrase in our chapter is, anyone who curses his father or his mother, his blood is upon him. And this phrase appears twice more in Sefer Yechezkel, with another famous phrase from Sefer Yoshua, his blood shall be on his head. Damo berosho. Why did this phrase catch my attention? Because it's out of place. Let me explain. First, I hope you wouldn't be surprised to learn that there's more blood in Sefer Vayikra than in any other book in Tanakh, or any combination of 2 books, or all the other 4 Chumashim together. Why shouldn't you be surprised? Because this is, after all, the Book of Offerings, and offerings involve blood. Still, the blood in Sefer Vayikra needs to be divided into 2, up to Perek Kaf and from Perek Kaf. Up to Perek Kaf, the book is flooded with blood. From Perek Kaf Aleph onwards, there is no blood whatsoever. Considering the uniqueness of the phrase Dmei Hembam and the disappearance of blood from the landscape in the next chapter, if I were to expect to see blood in the context of forbidden relationships anywhere, I would expect to see it earlier in chapter Yudchet, not in the later chapter Kaf. Here's something else. Between Perek Yudchet, which deals with forbidden relationships without blood, and Perek Kaf, which deals with bloody forbidden relationships, is Perek Yutet, which opens Parashat Kedoshim. We've previously discussed the complexity of Perek Yutet, which mixes topics without regard for pattern human thought. Another interesting point in this chapter is the phrases Lo ta'amod al dam re'echa and Lo tochlu al adam, and I won't attempt to explain what they mean, standing or eating over the blood, mainly because seemingly random order in Parashat Kedoshim doesn't encourage understanding by context. I will claim, however, that to use a rare blood phrase in the chapter that links the bloody forbidden relationships to the rest of the bloody part of the book, excuse my French, is not coincidental. And while we're gathering facts, it's worth noting that at the beginning of Sefer Vayikra, when the Torah mentions blood, it means blood, a red fluid flowing in the bodies of living beings, or in many cases in our book, former living beings. The physical blood was received, taken, sacrificed, sprinkled, thrown, brought, given, poured, spilled, squeezed out, covered, and not eaten. Despite the unusual phrasing, when Parashat Tazria mentions the woman who gave birth, who shall sit on the blood of purity, physical blood can still play a role. In Parashat Achremot, when the Torah finally explains the obsessive preoccupation with blood in the sentence Ki hadam hu hanefesh, the phrase Dmei Hembam, however, no longer describe physical blood. The presence of blood in a person does not indicate death. It's clear, then, that the blood described here is only symbolic. All that's left now is to clarify the attitude toward blood in Perek Yutet, and I will focus on Lo tochlu al hadam. And here, there's no longer a place for facts, and we start with speculations. The sages have 6 interpretations for Lo Tochlu Al Agdam. 5 in Masechet Sanhedrin. 1, the prohibition of eating a limb from a living animal. 2, not eating sacrificial meat while the blood still exists. 3, for a court not to eat on the day they executed a person. 4, to teach that the family of a person executed by the court does not make a condolence meal. 5, a warning not to behave like a ben sorer or moreh, so that the court will not execute you. And one more in Masechet Brachot, the prohibition of eating before prayer. Although 5 interpretations in Masechet Sanhedrin might deal with the physical blood, each stretches the definition a bit more than the previous. If including eating blood to the prohibition of eating a limb from a living animal comes naturally, in the case of Ben Sorer or Moreh, more mental elasticity is required to connect prohibition to its new name. Masechet Brachot, on the other hand, doesn't even attempt to disguise the metaphorical use. Physical blood does not play a role at all. Returning to speculation, will you forgive me if I offer one of my own? And no, if you don't forgive me, I won't stop. All I'm doing is trying to clear my conscience. It might be possible, I emphasize might, that this transition was intended to present blood in a new role. When Yeshaya says, "Your hands are full of blood," or Yirmiyah says, "And do not shed innocent blood in this place," the people can't answer, "But we didn't murder." When the elders of Israel declare, "Our hands did not shed this blood," anyone will understand that metaphorical blood exists, and it isn't necessarily less important than physical blood. In memory of my beloved and heroic student, Amichai Shimon ben Ishai and Batya Rubin, may Hashem avenge his blood. Dovi Holtz, one who loves Tanakh.